Okay, today I wanted to talk about The Foreigner, which stars Jackie Chan and Pierce Brosnan. Kind of the premise of the plot is Jackie Chan plays a Chinese immigrant in England, and his daughter is killed in a IRA terrorist bombing, and he goes on a quest for vengeance to find out who done it, basically. And this is kind of a long line of movies in terms of the crime, revenge, vigilante, but I watched this one kind of not really knowing what to expect with it, and I was very, very surprised by it. It was way better than I was actually expecting, and there's a few things that they did really well that kind of really stood out and different from everything else. So one of the things is it is incredibly, I say not, maybe not incredibly is the right word, it is very realistic. So it's a realistic, very realistic story in terms of the types of movies like this. So if you think about this in terms of what is realistic versus not, John Wick is not realistic. He's essentially a superhero. You know, he plays this superhero role where you can kind of do anything. You know, a lot of these characters that are the vigilante, you know, even in The Equalizer, you know, Denzel Washington's character is this larger than life. He just knows things. And he cares for nothing. You know, he cares about the mission, and that's it. And this is something that is really, really highlighted in the story, because what the beginning pieces is Jackie Chan, who plays Ngoc Minh Quan. I'm gonna probably butcher that, but that's his name, so we'll call him Quan for the whole story, for the remainder of this. He is now got to find who did this to his daughter, and there's a big question of how do you find out who did it, basically. You know, who done it, and how do you go about finding them? There's a lot of movies where the main character will go to his friend on the inside. I need your help. Yeah, we don't work together anymore. I need your help to, you know, go hacker man, find out. You know, there's this all kinds of these things that you can do. You know, you kind of have the usual suspects where it's, you know, you can find out who did it. The old friend, the hacker man, you know, download who's behind this for me, old enemies, open villains who openly flaunt, you know, hey, we're the ones who killed all these people, basically, or something like that. But none of this happens. Basically, in this one, you know, there's none of these are actually what's going on. The other thing that the story does really well is everybody acts very reasonably. And what I mean by that is that everyone acts true to their character. So, you know, true to their character and true to their motivations, which is the most important part. Even the side characters, motivations. They all act true to this, so nobody else is acting out of character. You really get an understanding of why these people do this. And thirdly, the third thing that is done really well is actually the story is told from the point of view of Quan, of course, who's our main character, and also of Liam, who is played by Pierce Brosnan, who's kind of the Irish deputy, the Irish minister over there representing the British government and kind of the ruling authority and body over there. Most of the story, in fact, a huge percentage of the story is actually told from Liam's point of view. You're kind of introduced to this 50% like Quan, 50% Liam, and then, you know, math, maybe it's 40-40 and 20 being other characters you're jumping through here. But you really do get a whole lot of perspective from Liam, which is interesting. And most of the stories don't do that. You know, for The Equalizer, you can kind of see it a little bit, but it's not one character. And then the other thing is it's not apparent whether Liam's character is a bad guy or not. And this is kind of the other interesting part, is oftentimes you're introduced to the main character, and then you're introduced to the villain, and you kind of poke them at each other. But it's not really introduced in the beginning whether Liam, Pierce Brosnan's character, Liam is a good guy or a bad guy. It's kind of just introduced that he's there, he's a player, he's an actor on the scene. So these are the kind of the three different things that I wanted to talk about with this movie, because it does it surprisingly well. Again, I went into this movie with pretty low expectations, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought Jackie Chan is amazing. He's always amazing, more or less. Pierce Brosnan is really good. He's a very good actor. I will say his Irish accent always threw me off, even though apparently he is Irish. So I don't really know what to make of that. But there you have it. So let's go into the story. So the story begins with Quan and his daughter, Fawn, I think. They are driving along. They're driving. He goes to pick up his daughter. They're driving through kind of the streets of London, just in the car, doing normal car stuff. And you get the idea that Quan, as far as a dad, is a bit... he's a bit of a worrywart, and, all this stuff. He's like, hey, who are you doing this? Are you doing that? Together. He's a bit of a worrywart. He's always worried about safety. She also is not, she's not worried about everything. And you also get to see, and this is something that I started noticing as I was watching it through it a little bit, there is a theme, a really good theme that ties in with the title of the movie is, The Foreigner. And you get this idea that he is an outsider. And this is one thing that it's almost, not to put on your My Fair Lady glasses to look in at the accents and everything, but Fawn has very much the London accent. She knows how to talk Londonese. She's very posh, very proper, very London. You can tell that she's grown up in this country, whereas Quan still has very much a broken English accent. And you can kind of see this two dichotomy. And again, these breadcrumbs through this story are subtle, but they're there, especially if you rewatch it and you start looking for them. You can kind of see, but this is what all ties together. Everything in this movie serves a purpose. It works towards the greater plot, which means it stays on theme, stays on character, stays on all these things are working together. There's no fat, there's no wasted time or anything like that. So again, these little things, they're driving together and they're going back and forth, and she steps out to go get some money. Quan accidentally backs up, and then another car who's driving like an absolute horrible person crashes into him. So basically we have a whole car wreck, and the guy gets out of the car and is like, yo, hey, WTF? And there's about to be a confrontation when suddenly, explosion basically from there. And the building that Quan's daughter just came out of or just went into has exploded, and it just have this exploded, utter devastation and everything like that. And then bam, we cut to the next part, which is the newspaper, and they're getting a call with somebody who says, it's us, we did it. They give a code word, Phoenix, and say we are the true IRA, or the authentic IRA, and we did it. And so the newspaper then goes down there, and again, this is interesting. You see, it's a change in point of view because we changed to the newspaper man. I don't remember his name, but it's not really important because he's kind of just a side character. So the newsman, I think it's Ian Wood. We'll call him Ian, the newsman. Newsman Ian then goes to the bomb site, and we get to see the bomb site from his point of view, which is interesting. You would normally have expected to see this from Quan's point of view, our main character, but no, you immediately been changed. And again, all this is happening very quickly in the movie. We're about 2 minutes in when the bomb goes off. It's 2 mins and bam, explosion, which again, I really appreciate. It's really, really annoying to get introduced to a character who they spend all this time playing, the world's tiniest violin, all the sad harpsichord, all the sad good violin music, just to talk about how wonderful a person they are, and then bam, kill them. You don't need that. And this is one thing that the movie really does a good job of, is if you want to introduce a character who's going to be the emotional support, which you then kill, which then drives the revenge, this kind of thing where you have, loved one who dies equals revenge. This is what a lot of the revenge plots do. In order to establish this loved one, you don't need 15 minutes of Sally sob story about how perfect our life was together. This movie is does very, very, very well with timing and everything. I still think it should have been a little bit shorter, but that's kind of another issue or another thing to talk about. I think what it does do is it is very efficient with its time. It moves very quickly. So 2 minutes in, bam, explosion. She is presumably dead. We don't actually know that yet. But the Ian goes down there to look, and he sees Q with his daughter, Quan, with his daughter's body, and he is crying, and it's really good cinematography, really good moment, because he's just silently crying and holding his daughter, and it is just a brutal scene where there's basically body parts everywhere, there's people dying, the skin burned off of them. It's brutal. And most importantly, Kwan's daughter is dead. She's dead. And then we immediately cut, hard cut to another group. And it's another group of men who we find out are the bombers. These are the people. And you get to see this really gross, but also it's not movie hyped up. A movie hype up is kind of like they play the music. The villain is, he's wearing a cape, what is it? Minor note, playing a minor note, bad guy. He's got the black hat from here, he's got a cape that's flowing in the wind. He's probably got an evil mustache, a pencil mustache with a goatee basically from here. And he's evil, got the eyes, he's got this, something like that. And he's got the cape. Let me fill in the cape real quick. Yeah, he's got the evil cape, and he's got an evil laugh. This is the usual things to introduce your villains. But what the movie does is basically you have this, and you have a guy come in here, and he asks a question, how many did I get? Which is brutal, because it's just utter horrifying to hear somebody talk about murdering so many people and just go, yeah, how many did I get? Did I get a high score, basically? And they're talking about, 12 and 3 times injured or something like that. And so what you're doing is, again, you've introduced your main character. He's a loving father. We love him. 2 minutes in, you immediately have this horrible accident happen. You have another point of view come in to see it, so we get to look at it from an audience as if we don't look at it as Q, we look at it from an outsider's perspective. We look at it from Ian's point of view perspective, which is, again, really cool, really different from what it is. Usually what they do is a lot of movies will have a moment where they have 5 to 10 minutes of a mourning session, where they go to the funeral, and all this stuff is just really brutal. That's what John Wick does. That's what a lot of these other movies are doing, where they kind of parade everything through, and it's very sad and everything like that. And it usually is genuinely sad story, but this one, it's moving quickly. And that's what I really appreciate about the movie. It's very time efficient. It's like 1 to step to 2 to step to 3 to step. Nothing is really sitting around wallowing. There's not like this. So this is what you expect, but what you get is, how many do I get? And the other thing is, they look so normal. They're just really regular people. Like, honestly, Liam strikes a much more imposing figure because, he's very, salt and pepper. He's very regal. He's very sophisticated. He's very powerful. He's a political. These guys look like nobodies. And that's what it is. It's very much a banal evil, basically, for it. And again, this is adding towards the realism. What do real evil people look like? And the fact is, they look like just like you and me. And that's kind of the issue with it. It's a very normal evil, or nothing is sensationalized. It is not this. You have all of these things that it could be, that in the movie, the hat, the evil goatee, or the Fu Manchu, or the mustache, something like that. But it's not. It's just regular people. And then we cut from there to Q, and he's basically we're asking, we're confronted with, of course, a question. Again, all of this is happening very quickly, which is a great question. What happens next? What is Quan going to do? What will he do? What is he going to do from here? You his next step, what is from here? And basically the bombers are there. They're like, hooray. And then they're hiding. They also introduce that, the bombers are hiding out, which of course, leads to this question of how are we going to find them? How are we going to find them, basically, from there? And so then we cut to Liam. Liam is Pierce Brosnan's character, and he is having an affair. We find out because he's with a woman, and then he gets another call from another woman who turns out to be his wife. So you get to see that. He lies to his wife. He's like, oh, I came home. And she's like, no, you didn't. And he's like, yeah, leave me alone, woman, go away. And there's this kind of instant, this, if you think about first impressions, this is our first impression with Liam. We don't really care one way or the other. Again, we don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. We don't know much about him, but we're introduced that he's having an affair and he's lying. This is the first thing that he is. And then he kind of is talking with her. She's mentioning, her brother's death anniversary and all this stuff. And they kind of go back and forth. And then we cut back to Q. And Quan's in his daughter's room, and there's a very much, what now? You know, what do you do? His daughter's dead. What does he do now? And it's just this open, glaring question of, what do you do? What do you as a father, what do you do? What do you do in this situation? What now? And then again, this is what I talk about when it's very, very realistic, because somebody's murdered his daughter, but he doesn't know who. He doesn't know who. He doesn't know how to find him. How are you going to find him? Call up your hacker bro to download who's behind this. Call up your old friend in the business. And again, this really is going back to reinforcing this idea of the foreigner. He's the outsider. Who does he have to go to? He has no one. Who can he look at? What are we doing? Something like that. Then we cut back to Liam. Liam's talking with the British cabinet minister, and she works for the prime minister from there, and Optimus prime minister, that is. And they start having this talk, and then essentially the heart of the talk is down to political games, where basically he's saying, I need this, and you want that. Oops. And they're basically playing this game where the cabinet minister is like, yeah, you need to find this out. And he's like, yeah, well, it would really help if I had this thing. And they're like, yeah, well, we really can't give you this thing. And he goes, well, if you can't give me this thing, I can't give you this thing. And they're like, well, maybe we could give you this thing. And he's like, well, then but then you need to get something for us. And he's like, okay. So basically they're playing this I need, you want, this back and forth game. It's a political game, basically, from there. And then the police visit Quan. The police show up, basically, and they ask this scene basically is boiled down to, don't you have anyone else? Is there anyone you can call? And again, this is a thing where I talk about where it's the everyone is competent, everyone is very reasonable. The police who show up are very sympathetic. There's just nothing they can do. They're asking him, like, anyone we can call, and he's like, nope, I have no more family. I have no more family, which is just, gosh, that's brutal. Brutal to hear. And this is kind of what is, again, we're building towards this idea of revenge. I have no one else who this. And of course, he's asking them, who is this? And they're like, oh yeah, we're totes going to find him. Super, super sure we're going to find him. And then, they mispronounce his name. They're like this. And you really just get this idea of the foreigner. He's not one of them. He's on the outside. And he has a problem. He needs to find out who's behind it, but he has no one. He's alone. This loneliness, this alone. He's so alone in this aspect where he is very much an outsider. And this is kind of reinforcing this idea, which again is building from there. All right. So then we cut back to Liam. Liam basically begins, quote unquote, to shake the tree. Shake the tree, which just generally would refer to bringing a bunch of Irish people who may be behind this into a room and yelling at him. Because again, remember, we don't know what he is. We don't know if he's a good guy. We don't know if he's a bad guy. But think about how he was first introduced. He's having an affair. So what this does is you have a guy who's a great guy. And think of what you're setting up as a writer, what the story is setting up. What you have is he's a loving father who's just had something horrible with him. So we like Quan. Bam. Introduce the second character, Liam. We don't really like him. Kind of scummy, you can understand why someone would have an affair and everything like that, because there obviously seems to be some sort of history between his wife. There's some tension there. He's going to just openly lie to her, and she's just like, kind of like, yeah, whatever. Okay, buddy. But she's still with him, so it's kind of like, what's going on? But he's having an affair out with her, so it's building. But Liam then starts saying, you need to find out who's behind this. Find out now. And a lot of these other guys are basically saying, like, some people agree with what they're doing. Some people agree. Some people like what they're doing. And again, an aspect of this which is interesting is because as you build, again, all of these guys are Irish. It's very much Irish, and Liam says, we're going to find out who did it, and we're going to handle this internally, aka no outsiders. No Brits. That means no Brits or Chinaman or anything, as they refer to him as. We're going to handle this internally. And as the story builds this internal aspect, where you have this internal us aspect, it only highlights those who are not us, aka outsiders, people who are outside there from there. He begins to, shake the tree and basically says, we need to find out who it is. And then it kind of cuts to, from here, the story cuts to SO15, which is, I guess, counterterrorism or counterintelligence, some sort variety. And we're introduced to Commander Bromley, who's leading the investigation to find out. And Quan continually is calling him. And the police again says, yeah, the Chinaman's here again. This derogatory, hey, this guy, this outsider, he's not one of us. And again, you're building this, he's not one of us. There's this bridge between them. He's here for days asking to speak with you. Bromley brushes him off, but then goes out to speak to him. And Quan is basically saying, I need the names. I need to know who did this. And Bromley's like, no idea. But we will find them. We will find them. Or give us time. We're working on this. And here's the thing. This is the interesting thing with Bromley's character is he basically tells Quan, we can't help you. You need to go home. You need to move on, and you need to leave us alone because we're going to find this. But everything he says, the tone, everything is very sympathetic. Everything is very realistic. This is the reason why, villains and rivals really work with people is because people like to have somebody to fight against. But in real life, if you've noticed, most people just don't care. It's not that you don't have a rival because there's no evil people. You don't have a rival because no one cares about you. That sounds really horrible to say. But nobody really cares about you enough to stand against you like that. You have to be someone. And this is what stories offer. This is, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yugi and Kaiba. They have this fight, Naruto, Sasuke. You have all these aspects where you have a rival to fight against. There's kind of this idea of you have to be important enough for this whole thing to work out and all that. But for a lot of people, they don't have that. And this is what it is. The realistic explanation is Bromley is highly competent. That's why he's in charge. He's highly good at his job. And there's that aspect where you would almost want him to be incompetent so you can rage against the machine about how no one understands or something like that. But no, he understands. He's incredibly sympathetic. He's like, listen, there's nothing I can do to make this any better. We are going to find them. We are working on it. We're working on it. We're going to find them. You need to leave us alone from here. And then Quan's like, give me a name of someone else who may know. And he's like, no, I don't know. Like, we're working on it. But this is we're basically told everything that Bromley says, whether we want to, or in some sense, you almost want him to disagree, to rage against the machine, some aspect of this. It just, he's right. How are we going to find him? Who did this? What else can you do? And, they basically going from there. So we're working on it. This is what it is. So again, we're left with Q is left with nothing. Quan is left with nothing. He doesn't know anything at this point. He doesn't know who's behind it, anything like this. And again, the story does a great job of bam, 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 bam. There's no too much wallowing. Even the wallowing that Quan did in his daughter's room is actually pretty quick, but that's all it is. It's very, very quickly moving these plot points. And then, of course, it cuts to 3 weeks later, which, of course, is a great thing to contrast with we're working on it. 3 weeks later, no one's found them. And Quan is researching and trying to find out, who might be behind this. And he sees Liam on the TV talking about the IRA, basically, and these bombings, saying, we're working on it. We're working on it. And so Quan starts connecting the dots. Because he goes, hey, this guy's former IRA. He's former IRA. He's the leader of the Sinn Féin. I don't know how to say it. I don't speak Gaelic. I don't know how to speak that. But it's the political party. He's very important. You get this idea, he's on TV. And it cuts to basically, him and Liam is arranging for all these other, CNN wants to interview you. All these other important people, establishing him as a very important character. Basically, he's now kind of at the center of this. And this is an aspect, again, think about this. We don't know if he's a good guy or bad guy. Period. Which is bizarre. But then we get something interesting where we basically have been building up this character who we like, Quan, and we've got this other character who we kind of don't like, but you don't really have an exact reason. I mean, he's having an affair, but he's not the worst person ever. I mean, maybe he is. We don't really know. But you have Quan, and then you're setting up for a confrontation. And this is interesting because All of this is building up. You don't know what to think. And this is another thing that the story does really well, is because this is the mystery. We don't know who's behind it. We don't know who's doing what. This is the thing where John Wick offers a very, very simple solution to it all, where in the first 5 minutes, the dog's dead, he's sad, and then the next question is who's behind it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's that dumb Russian kid. There you go. Bam. There's your enemy. There's your enemy from there. And it's interesting because we've gotten to see the bombers. We get to see them. But then for the next 20, 30, maybe even 45 minutes of the movie, we don't see them. They kind of fade off into this nameless, faceless group, which again adds really well into this idea of who's behind it. How are you supposed to find them? Who's going to be behind this? How are we supposed to find them? So Quan starts calling Liam, and Liam basically kind of gives him the same answer, which is, I don't know who. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know who. Go away. And Quan doesn't believe, says, I don't believe you. Because again, and this is the interesting part, because we don't know if Quan's onto something or not. Does Quan know something extra that we don't? Is Liam lying? We don't know. This is another thing that's really cool to watch out, is because usually with the vigilante movies, the main character is clearly in the good and clearly on the right path. Basically, the right path is here. It's like, let's see, the right way, that way, sir, up the stairs and to the left. That's the right way. We don't know what to do, which is, again, asking to this mystery, adding to this realism, because it's like, who's behind this attack that did untold evil? We don't know. And it's this open question that just really starting to drive our main character, because he's trying to figure out what to do. What do you do when no one knows, basically? Because Liam is saying he has no idea. He's assured the cabinet minister he has no idea. He's assured all of his other Irish buddies, in the council, that we don't know who did it, And so Quan then says, I don't believe you. AKA, I don't believe you. And so then what happens is then Quan goes and basically burns the rest of his memorabilia of his family. And it's kind of a heartfelt scene, and he leaves. He leaves his friend Lam, I think that's her name, with an M, I believe, who he works at the restaurant with. He owns a restaurant. He leaves the restaurant to her and disappears, basically. And then he goes and, this is kind of his suit up moment, where he changes his SIM card, disguises his van, and then drives. He goes to Belfast. So it turns out he's going over here, and then he shows up at Liam's office. And very much the same thing happens, where he's like, hey, I need to speak to Mr. Liam Hennessy. And they're like, nope, get lost, sucker. And it's interesting because there's something that is interesting, because again, at this point, the audience doesn't know where Liam is. We don't really know if he's good or bad. We don't really care for him. And now he's in contrast with a character that we do like. So we're starting not to like him even more. And we don't even know why yet, which is really interesting as far as the story goes, because again, everything is very subtle. Everything is very realistic. So far, everyone has acted very reasonably. Liam's character, Liam Brosnan's character, Liam is a politician. What do politicians do? Well, I'm very sorry to say, I'm very sorry about this, I'm very sorry about that, and losses, and yes, kissing hands, shaking babies, the whole thing. It's a very politicized, very sanitized message from here that you're going. And this is kind of the aspect that you're going, is like, how is Liam supposed to know? And we also see from Liam's perspective, his hidden view that Quan doesn't know about, that he also says that he doesn't know. So we're just led to believe that he doesn't know, because he seems to not know, but then Quan doesn't believe him. So now we're left to kind of figure out what's going on. Is Quan crazy? Has he lost his mind? Is he gone in the grief and everything like that? Has he just completely lost himself? And so he shows up to the office, and something interesting happens. Basically, Liam has these two guys next to him, which again, I don't know how reasonable this is, but they don't call the police when when Quan won't leave. Liam basically has these two bodyguard guys, and they are getting ready to rough him up and toss him out. And again, this is the interesting thing. So Liam then agrees to meet with Quan and basically tells him the same thing. And there's a great, I'm actually running out of paper here. There's a great line that goes from here, where Quan is basically like, if your daughter died, what would you do? And Liam says, I would do everything in my power. And then Quan has this great line in return, which is like, okay, I understand. I'm in agreement with you. And I've chosen you. Because, of course, it's interesting because, we don't really know who to believe at this point, because Quan's reasoning is very sound, which is, listen, you're the most important guy over here. You're Irish. You're former member of the IRA. You know what's going on. And Liam says, no, I don't know what's going on. Which seems odd, but then we've gotten to see this different point of view. Because, again, a lot of the story at this point has been told from Liam's point of view. This is a very kind of different as far as it goes. So we get to see Liam's point of view, and he keeps saying, I don't know who did it. I don't know what you guys want from me. I just don't know who did it. And so we're kind of left to figure out and kind of wonder, well, maybe he is telling the truth. He could be telling the truth, which is, we don't know. It's this interesting thing. We don't know who to believe, who to believe. Quan seems to have it together. He hasn't gone crazy, but it's possible he just doesn't know, which again, we have this faceless bombers that we haven't seen in a while. We have, they're evil and completely, just normal, but we don't know where they are, how to find them. We went to go see Bromley, and Bromley's like, yeah, we're working on it. There's also nothing I can offer you. And that's legitimate. It's not just a get lost, old man. It's a, listen, we are working on this. You have to let us do our jobs. There you go. And there you go. But 3 weeks go by, and they found nothing. They have absolutely nothing to go for it. And so he goes to Liam's office, and they're getting ready to toss him out. And Liam meets with him, but then he leaves. And then so Quan goes, and this is an interesting thing, because again, you think we've been building this conflict up. We build this character the audience likes subtly, because again, we haven't done anything. He's a good father, so we like him. And then Liam, though, because normally there's this idea of the more of the character's story you show, the more the audience will like them. That's usually how this works. But Liam's character, we were introduced to him as the affair guy, as kind of a politician. We don't really know what his angle is, but now we're thrust into conflict because guess what? Quan blows up the bathroom, and this is a message. And then he goes home and calls him and goes, have you changed your mind yet? Have you changed your mind? Tell me the names. I want the names. Give me the names of whoever's behind it. Give me someone's name. And then Liam is like, yeah, get lost. You don't know who you're messing with. And then, of course, Quan hangs up, which is a great moment. He's like, wanker, you called me, threatened me, and hang up on me? I'm supposed to hang up on you. But again, it adds to this building of, you don't know who you're messing with. Said over the telephone, you don't know who you're messing with, which is interesting. For a normal politician, it gets you thinking, hey, there were thug guys here. He was a member of the IRA. All of this is starting to look a little bit more interesting. But again, you got to think, we don't really have much to go on. Quan doesn't have a huge amount to go on for this. He's got a suspicion. You were part of this group. You have to know who's doing it now, which is not really completely true. It's likely. There's a chance. But we don't know. But again, he's pushing this, and this is kind of where it's interesting, is that we don't know what it is. But at the same time, I'll be honest, I was totally behind it as an audience member. I was like, go get this guy. Go mess with this guy, basically. I think it's awesome that you blew up his bathroom. I think this is great. Because the other thing is that Quan doesn't do is he doesn't cross the line. He doesn't kill anyone. He doesn't injure anyone. He doesn't do anything bad. He basically is just saying, hey, you need to give me the names. I know give me the names. And so then you don't know who you're dealing with, which is, again, interesting because, again, if this is just a regular politician, this is a bit bizarre that this is building this way. But, and just think about what we're doing here is we're having this whole talk about who is Liam, what's going. We see his point of view, but we don't necessarily know if it's true. But also think of it compared to like The Equalizer or John Wick, or some of these other ones where it's this, you have, hello, I'm evil McEvil man, and I'm, beating up prostitutes and destroying, raping women. I'm doing all this horrible stuff from here. And they're open about it. But this one, we have the bombers. We haven't seen the bombers in forever. They're just completely gone. They're absolutely faceless. They're hiding. They haven't come out of hiding yet. So we don't know what to do. We have Liam, but we don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. But now some odd things keep happening. And so then it's forcing the audience to make a choice. We choose Quan, of course, because after all, he's a great dad. We all like all these things from there. And this is just this interesting idea. And so what happens then is Liam sends, find out where he lives, find out who's behind him, find him. And then they go and find him. And then they send 4 guys after Quan to go rough him up and throw him out of Belfast. They show up outside the Airbnb. The landlady just lets them in, which again is adding to this Irish this us group, you don't know who you're dealing with. Belfast doesn't like these types of accusations going around, which is, again, it's interesting. It's giving this good theme. This is thematic. It's very thematically on point. This is the theme going through the movie is the foreigner. And guess what? Everyone in this town apparently, hey, look, you got a Chinaman staying with you? Yep, he's over there. He's at this lady's house. So she lets the 4 guys, and the 4 guys come up and they jump Quan, but then he fights them off. And this is the first part where we really get to see Quan as far as what he's capable of in terms of combat. He's very, very good at combat. And the other thing, though, is that it's a very realistic fight. It's 4 guys. It's not John Wick where it's 1 versus 50. It's for 4 guys. He beats up 4 guys, but he doesn't really escape. It's not clean. It's not a clean fight, but he does get the upper hand of them, and he fights 4 of them and kind of goes from there. And then he's, before they get to him, he's been building bombs, basically from here. But then they go and find out that he's been building bombs. And then, guess what happens? Liam is talking to the cabinet minister again. Where's right here. Cabinet minister. This is their second conversation. And what do they talk about? Political games. They're talking about political games. And now we're starting to get more and more of this sneaking suspicion. Because again, Liam hasn't done anything too much outward. Because from his point of view, there is a point of view where he's got this crazy China guy who's in his bathroom blowing it up, and he doesn't know who it is. But again, just think of this. This is the subtlety of this is the realistic everything. Nothing is open. Everything is in the shadows. Nobody knows anything. And so the cabinet minister is talking to him, and he's like, I need pardons. This is what he needs, and you need this, and I need this. And she's like, well, we're working on it. And he's like, well, I'm working on it. You should give me what I want. She's like, I'm working on it. You should give me what I want. And again, we have these political games going around. These political games. And this is kind of what's going on. And this eventually, of course, we'll find out, builds into the greater plan, the greater plot behind the movie. And what you very much have is this idea of this intrigue, what's going on, who's behind it, and this is the interesting aspect because, not in the John Wick or the Equalizer or, any of these other type of movies, you kind of know who is behind it, basically from the get-go. You can kind of see, who's guilty, but they're trying to figure out who's behind it because somebody's supporting the Authentic IRA, these terrorists who just blew up and killed Quan's daughter. But we don't know who they're working for. We don't know where they're at. We don't know what they really want. You can kind of guess IRA stuff. They want, England gone, basically, United Ireland, and of course all the Protestants dead or whatever else they want. But you have this idea where this is building, and this is the intrigue for it. This is the intrigue that's just building. And then Liam goes to meet, we go back to Liam, again, because it's interesting. Keep in mind, this point of view, whose point of view are we learning of? And this is an interesting aspect of it where we're continually getting more and more to see from Liam's point of view. It's almost, I almost want to say it's more Liam's point of view than this Quan's, but I think it is a mix. It's about 50-50 or 40-40, however you want to think about it. We're getting it from his point of view. And we get to see from that, and he goes and meets his mistress again, the affair lady, whoever he's having an affair with. I can't remember where it is. Yep, here we go. He's with the woman, the affair woman. We get to see her, and there's this idea of Quan shows up, takes a picture, and again, it's names. And so what you get is this rising escalation from here. And then Liam calls his nephew up. I'm really running out of paper. He calls his nephew up from here. His nephew who is in America, who's, he's previously called up to go meet with Bromley. I need you to go secretly meet with Bromley and make a deal with him because no one can know we're talking to them, aka the Brits. Again, it's reinforcing this outsider idea based along, this ethnicity, this cultural heritage, where this us idea, which every time you define this us more, you make it ever more plain who is not us, aka the foreigner. Jackie Chan's character, Ngoc Minh Quan, the Chinaman, as he's constantly referred to, even by everyone, basically from here, kind of refers to him as that way. And so he's like, secretly, they have a plan to find out, the nephew, Sean, I think is his name. Nephew says that, we have a plan to find out who's behind it. And again, it's reinforcing this idea of maybe Liam doesn't know, because he got Sean all the way up here to figure out who's behind it, what's going on. This is the intrigue. This is what's going on with this. And again, this is a really interesting idea, because what you've got is a pretty interesting one. You have this idea of, who do you believe? You have this conflict of who do you believe? And this is the interesting part, because as an audience, we get to figure out this intrigue. We get to go along with this. And it's really, really interesting and really well done. And so then Liam goes to what they call the farm, which is kind of a remote, isolated place, because obviously they haven't caught Quan. They don't know what's going on. Quan follows them, and he goes through and sets off a whole bunch of bombs at the farm. So basically you have, the farmhouse, which, by the way, is a really, really, really lovely house. I would love to have one of those. Bam. And then we have the barn over here. And then of course, it explodes. It's an exploding barn from there. An exploding barn. And so basically you have this escalation now, but still people are getting injured, but you still don't really know what's going on. And this is what it's building towards as far as the plot goes. And it's just, I really enjoyed the subtlety of it, because what we eventually find out is it turns out that Liam actually knows more than he's been letting on. Because basically we start getting insight into, well, it turns out that he was behind it. He was in part behind the bombings. He was working with another guy named Hugh McGraw, but it's McGrath, but they call him McGraw. He's part of it, but he doesn't exactly know who it was. But this was planned, so it couldn't be traced back to him. Because again, this is an interesting part. This is a really good plan. They used this, he was going to use this bombs and this plot to basically accelerate his political career, and it kind of harkens back to all these political games he's been playing with a cabinet minister in order to get what he wants and to be seen as the hero, because if he can find out who they are, this is what it is. But it turns out they weren't supposed to kill anyone. And so again, we can start to see that, okay, Quan's on the right track. He does know something. He is lying to us. But he still doesn't know who it was. He just knows that someone was behind it. Turns out that it was a plot gone wrong or something like this. And he's working with McGraw to try and figure out from there what it is. And what we get is this continued escalation from here, because it turns out then another bomb goes off and they blow up a bus. One of the big red buses, basically, from here. I don't think they're really this big, because I don't think they're like 3-deck players, but they're like this. The bus blows up, and we get a bunch more dead, and we get to see the bombers again, and a bunch more people are dead, and everything's beginning to escalate upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards. And then it turns out Liam's plan, his great plan that he's been working out with the nephew, basically from here, to find out when, nephew and Bromley, to figure out who's behind it, it doesn't work. Someone else has betrayed them. And he starts coming up and he goes, okay, it was his wife. His wife, who's actually having a weird affair with the nephew. It turns out she sold out Liam to McGraw, the other guy he was working with, for the names. And basically what we have is we have this race in terms of a plot, is basically we have Quan, who's going after Liam, and then we have Liam, who's trying to figure out who's behind it, and then he's competing against McGraw, and we have then Bromley, who's over here, who's working towards it. And again, this is an interesting aspect because every one of these characters is highly competent. McGraw's plan is great. It's really good. He's got all this. He turns out the woman Liam's been having an affair with is one of his agents. It's all this intrigue, but it's kind of very just normal. Like they still manage to make it feel normal, even though it is quite a fantastic plot. But it is still done very well. It's done very normally, and how they figure it out is very normally. Because Liam basically ties McGraw. Bromley says, hey, we're getting ready to come and arrest you. Give me the names in 30 minutes, or else we're going to find it. Because we know McGraw knows who it is, because he met with the terrorists. Give us the names and where the next bombing is in 30 minutes, or we're coming to get you, and we're going to arrest you and end your career. And Liam basically ties McGraw to a chair, shoots a bunch of holes into him until he tells him the names, and then he gives the names to Sean, his nephew, and says, hey, we need to find these people and we need to deal with them. He also gives the names to Bromley, who then they start moving in. But then Sean goes after Quan in the woods because Sean is a ranger, the special elite of fighting in the army, I believe, at least in the American army. And Quan ends up beating him. He beats him, and he ends up letting him live in exchange for the names. And so Quan gets what he wants. And so then we come to this aspect where there's this house, basically here, that all the bombers end up being, because the bombers, meanwhile, are working on another plot. That's not super important to this aspect, though, is we got then the bombers from here. And they're here in this house, and they're all inside from here, and they're getting watched. There's basically, snipers with really long sniper rifles who were watching them, and they're using all the special code words. And it turns out that actually Bromley and his guys actually know what they're doing. They have this whole, place locked down, and they're watching it, with the laser sights, and they're watching all these terrorists who were inside here, the IRA, Authentic IRA members, and they're basically waiting there, unsuspecting in there. And lo and behold, something surprising happens, though, is that Q shows up at the door and ends up killing all of them. Because again, Bromley and his men are basically everywhere. They're underneath the house, they're over the house, waiting to go down, waiting to come in here. There's busfuls of them, they're getting ready to move in, but Quan beats them to it. He comes in and he fights them, and again, it's not elegant. They almost get the better hand of him, but he kills all of the terrorists, including the guy who he finds out is the one who blew up his daughter, the guy with the burn mark, Patrick O'Reilly, is the most Irish McIrish name ever. He kills him, and basically it's kind of a bloodbath, and then he leaves. He vanishes. And then everybody else comes in. The rest of the troops show up. They come in and just find a bunch of dead bodies. Turns out the only one left is Maggie, who's the girl who, Liam was having the affair with, and she's also the one who set up this other bomb. And what happens is basically they start torturing her. The counterintelligence guys start torturing her, and the guy even gets out his electric clippies and says, you're going to tell me who it is. She tells them where the bomb is, and so they go and then they get the bomb, which was put in a laptop from Ian. Turns out our boy Ian, the newsman, was making a comeback. But the bomb was in his laptop, and it explodes, but they do manage to save it in time. And it's interesting, though, because then Bromley basically goes, no loose ends. And so then they shoot Maggie and just kill her. And again, it's really funny because this is an utterly fantastic story. It's kind of this wild, imaginary, but it's just all done very almost boring-like in a sense, because you're trying to tone down the fantasy element of it, make it seem very normal. And the way you do it is there's no capes, there's no speeches, there's no, evil laughs. There's just some guy did something evil. Okay. And what'd you have for breakfast? It's a very normal matter-of-fact thing. The way they find everything is very normal. We don't know who. We can't spin up, this out of thin air. This is always the joke, between, the enhance. We caught a CCTV footage of the killer, and then, it's really blurry, but then they're just like, enhance. And they seem to just pull up evidence out of thin air. Just enhance, keep enhancing the video until you have a perfect camera view of our guy. And basically you see Bromley and his men have been working for months probably, or at least a month, months and hours combing through all this boring stuff to try and figure out and get closer and closer and closer and closer. And with that they know, then it gives Liam enough to know who's behind it, who then interrogates McGrath, who then, he gives it to Sean, who gives it to Quan, who then finds out who it is. And basically it's this very normal training along, which is just interesting how this all plays out from here. So we've got the CCTV, he's got this whole thing, and Quan gets it, and then he goes home, returns to his restaurant with Lam, and they kind of kiss. So you kind of get the idea that she's kind of in love with him or something like that. He returns back to his restaurant, and then Bromley's just like, let him go, fine. And we turns out Bromley's a great guy for that reason. And the story is I really enjoyed it. I was constantly surprised by how well it was, because they continually had conspiracy plots and all this thing and everything like that, but it was just told in a very normal way, which I just found very, very interesting in that regard. The mystery, the intrigue. Again, we didn't really know what to think of Liam. We don't really know what to do with him. What kind of character? Is he good or bad? Basically from here, we don't really know how this works and everything like that. So this is something that the story just does really well in kind of developing and working on, that I really enjoyed. So, but yeah, I think that covers all my points and everything. I hope you guys enjoy this one, and I will see you in the next one.